Andrew Vogt, we got this whole crew together, and then we also bring in a bunch of like on a like we just did a record with Christine Huckel, who she's in Wolfpack, and Joe Dart is on that record, and Theo Katzman played drums on part of that record, and there's just like just a bunch of cool artists that are kind of in our orbit.
They came in to record, or did they send things remotely?
For that record, Joe sent his parts remotely. He only played on one tune, but he sent his stuff remotely, and Theo came in to record. But actually, Theo came in to record. But I think that the song that he recorded is going to be on the next record. So yeah, he did some background vocals and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been all over the place, but we're kind of bringing all of these people into the crew, and most of the records that Woody and I are putting out coming up are pretty much the same, like 10 people involved in them.
That's awesome, man. Well, I can't wait to hear the ones that come out, and
yeah.
I'll give the record, if it's out, I'll give the record a listen.
Yeah, please do. Christine Huckel,
soon.
May Erlewine, and Woody and Jeremy are the ones that are
cool.
coming out shortly.
I'll pop those names in the show notes, and hopefully if there's links, I'll pop them in as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you say sometimes you do recording, sometimes you do mixing, sometimes you do mastering. Like generally, do you send out for mastering, or is it like really depend?
I have a couple people that I send out to. It really depends. I send out to Greg Calby at Sterling Sound, who I really, really love. And I send out to Howie Weinberg, who I really adore. And those guys
awesome.
are, they're the best in the world. Like they, Howie mastered Nevermind. You know what I mean? Like it's that echelon of people. But what I've kind of found is if I don't have the budget to go to those guys, which they're not cheap, I would prefer to just master it myself, because a lot of people that I'll send mastering to, what it'll turn into is me trying to master through them in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like if I have to go through more than one revision with anyone, at that point, I'm just trying to get them to do what I would have done on mastering. And
right, I hear that. Mastering's tricky because on one hand, like you don't want to like let go of the control that you had over a record, but on the other hand, you've kind of lost all of your objectivity. You know what I mean?
It's true. It's and to speak to that, the thing that I try to do with records is I try to listen to other records while I'm making, especially while I'm mixing, as much as I possibly can. Like probably once an hour, I'll throw on another record and just listen to it for 5 minutes and then go back.
Do you have it as like a reference in your template, or are you just popping it on Spotify or something?
Different things. Sometimes I'll just take a break and just listen to some stuff, and sometimes I'll pop stuff into my template so I can like swap back and forth really quickly and listen to like balanced stuff and overall low end and high end stuff. But what I find with that is that it keeps me grounded in that, to where like I can kind of trust my point of reference, because there's a bunch of records that I know well that I can constantly kind of ground myself with. And it also keeps me super honest. Like when I think probably 5 years ago I started doing that, and prior to that, I would have the unfortunate experience of mixing a record and feeling really great, or mixing a song and feeling really great about it. And then you go out and you listen in the car and it feels good. You feel good about it. And then you turn off your CD player and the radio comes on and you're like, fuck, because it's not even close to, like, you're just getting your ass handed to you. And
right.
By having like using a lot of references, my ass is getting handed to me within the first like 30 minutes of the mix. And constantly, I'm constantly checking, I'm checking that every hour. So it's not as like, you don't feel as good about it while you're doing it. Like you kind of feel like a piece of shit when you keep listening back and forth and you're just like, oh fuck. Like you mix, you mix for an hour and you're like, somehow I'm even further than I was an hour ago from this being, competing sonically with this song. But you just kind of fight it out, and there's no surprises at the end of it. Like the speakers don't lie at the end of the day. So if you can listen to other music and listen to the music that you just made and you still feel good about it, it's, usually it tends to translate pretty well.
Wow. I love that. Yeah. I've believe me, I've been in that spot where like, oh, this sounds great, and then you listen to another record and you're like, oh shit, I'm terrible.
Oh my god, we all are. It's
still we've all been
happens.
there, right? Yeah, of course. What are you gonna do? But so in your hybrid setup of like working from home and working from studios, like where do you mix so you can like monitor properly?
I've been kind of experimenting with that lately. I would say about 60% of the records that I do, I just mix at the studio. We have our Studio B, which is like an overdub room that's also great for mixing. It's got an SSL console and it's like it's much more legit than a lot of Studio Bs, what people think of when they hear Studio B, but it's a great
more
room
legit than my Studio A. So you're looking at that.
It's more legit than my current Studio A right now. So, but we also have a bunch of it's a great listening situation. We have ATCs in there and an ATC sub, and it's really well treated and stuff. So I really trust that room. When I'm at home, I may. If a record doesn't have the budget for me to, record budgets are pretty much set in stone nowadays, and they don't have a lot of wiggle room. And I do it case by case whether or not we have the budget for me to start a mix in the studio and finish it there. And if we don't, if the budget is for me to have, if I'm only going to have 5 hours a song to mix the record, I'll probably opt to add 2 hours to that budget and start the mix, do half of the mix at home and half of the mix in the studio. And I work on these headphones. I work on Bear Dynamic DT880s, which I really dig. And I can get a good sense of a lot of things on these headphones.
Are they open back? They're open back?
They're semi-open, which I, to be honest, don't have a clue what that means, but they are. I think they're just ported in some way that is relevant. But they feel, they don't feel flat to me, but they feel relatively flat as far as headphones go. And I listen to a lot of stuff on them, so they feel musical. I can trust them to get the feeling across. And I usually, when I'm mixing it, doing the whole mix, I'll try to take it to the finish line as much as I possibly can. Like I'll try to actually finish the mix as well as I can on headphones, and then I will take it to the studio and make all of the adjustments that I need to make to I'll basically fix all of the mistakes that I made on my headphones. Which oftentimes sometimes it's little stuff, sometimes it's really broad stroke stuff, but usually a lot of the stuff that I can figure out really well on headphones is like vocal effects and delays and all these things that I tend to automate and spend a lot of time working on. I can do on my headphones, and then I can go to the studio and do the detail work.
Yeah, like the EQing and whatever.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect situation. Like it's not what I.
There's no perfect situation.
There's
anymore,
no perfect
man.
situation. It's a functional situation. If I had all the budget in the world on every record, I would start it in the studio because it happens occasionally that I'll have to backtrack on things because I was relying on an amount of low end on my drums that is not functional, so I got to rework the relationship between the drums and bass, and that kind of changes. So occasionally I got to take a few steps back, but most of the time it kind of works out well, and it's definitely a huge money saver. Like it definitely saves me a lot. It doesn't save my clients any money, but it saves them. It saves me the creative space that I need to work without trying to settle for something that isn't as good as I can do.
I totally hear that. Wow, man. So it sounds like you're doing so many things. Like, do you have one thing that's your favorite thing to do in the studio?
I love recording drums. That's I think one of my favorite things to do in the studio. I really adore recording drums, and I love the feeling of making things or even just recording a band. I love recording a band because when you record a band and you leave at the end of the day and it sounds like a record, and that's my intention when I record a band, is like I don't want my rough mixes to sound like rough mixes. I want them to sound like a record at the end of the day. And that's such an exciting thing for everyone to when the band comes in and they listen back and it sounds like a record, and then you can go home and listen to it and it sounds like something special. That's like the most exciting thing to me
I love that. Wow.
I just adore that feeling.
The thrill of making something.
Yeah, you started with nothing and you left with something really special. That's a really unique feeling that I really love. And it's also really connective. Like, you know what I mean? You're really connected with the people that you're working with, and you, it gives you a lot of feels, you know? I love mixing too. I look at them as all, I don't see a huge amount of separation between the different parts of the process to me. Like there's lots of things that I get hired to mix on, and I end up with a producer credit on them because I will, mixing is problem solving a lot of the time. You know what I mean? This chorus doesn't feel big enough. This chorus doesn't have enough mid-range in it or whatever like that. Right. And if the chorus doesn't have enough mid-range, there's many answers that can solve that. And one of them is a mixing answer, which is adding mid-range to instruments. And another one is a production answer, which is adding a mid-rangey instrument to that chorus, or subtracting instruments that are adding high end and low end to that chorus. So, there's all these different things that you can do. And I don't take my mixer hat off and put on my producer hat and suggest to the client that we should add an organ in the chorus. I just look at it. It's all like, they're all the tools that we have in our palette, and we're going to do whatever the track feels like it needs. And if that feels like mixing, that feels like mixing. And if that feels like production, that's, we can call it whatever we want, but it's all just trying to solve the same problem.
It's just making records.
It's just making records. Exactly.
You just make records.
I do so much mixing while I'm tracking that it's not like if I'm producing a record, it's going the way that I want to, like if I'm not struggling with stuff sonically, it's like 70% of the way mixed when we go into mixing it, because we're like, trying to make so many choices at the time.
Wow, that's awesome. That's that analog old school mentality kind of giving you
exactly
those decisions at the get go.
Yep, the record that I was talking about a second ago, May Erlewine. We tracked it to 8 tracks. So like when it went into mix, it was, which actually that record was mixed by Noah Jorgensen, I believe is the way he says his last name. But he couldn't have done that. Like the record already sounded the way that the record was going to sound when we sent it to him, because he pretty much had 8 tracks to work with, and you can kind of only do so much to like the drums were on 2 tracks. Like you can't change the drum sound completely at that point,
Wow. That's awesome, dude. So we've talked a lot of stuff. What's one thing that you would share with the audience, somebody who's like coming up in this industry? Like what's one thing you would tell them to either do or not do at the beginning of their career?
Yeah, sure. Well, I could say something that I tell to a lot of we have a really, really great internship program at the studio. And so I end up like, kind of mentoring a lot of people who were me 10 years ago. And the thing that I try to implore to all of them is that there is a huge amount of time that it takes to develop this skill set. And being a really talented producer is being able to flourish in any environment that you're put in. Right. So for people to not be able to stump you, for you to have the answer to any question, anything that can go wrong in a session, you've seen it happen before, and you have some ideas of how to help. And the only way that can ever happen is if you're putting in a huge amount of time into it, and if you're just constantly doing it for a really extended period of time. And so there's lots of people who are worried about the financial stuff of like how to start your business early on, and how to make money early on, and how to do your social media, and how to do all this stuff. And which admittedly I'm terrible at social media, so I'm certainly not the person to talk to about that. But
I had to hunt you down. I had to stalk your Facebook to get in touch with you.
It's something I could for sure use some improvement on. But
no, it's probably a good thing to not be amazing at, to be honest.
Well, I truthfully, I think that for me, this isn't for everyone, but for me, the skill set and the social media, at least at the beginning, were mutually exclusive, where I was so focused on and kind of still am so focused on the craft that I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about networking and how to get clients and how to